hey from wherever you're at right now, hopefully not working, or if you're working from home. I promised last weekend that I was going to read something unpublished, and I tried to stream that live on Monday, I think, and apparently I just sat on camera for like 20 minutes and nobody could hear me, so I deleted that, and now I'm here to try again. I hope everyone's doing okay. Everybody's bored. I am bored to tears, even though I've got a ton of work to do. So hopefully this will help. If not, sorry. This is actually, it's a weird sort of story that I had started, and it's an idea that I keep going back to, and I'm actually still trying to work on it in a way. It's something that, like, not in this form, not in a young adult book, but it's something totally different. But this was one attempt that I made to write something, and it was going to be a series of interconnected short stories that would tell one overarching story. And that's really it. Content warning, if you're squeamish, there is a bit of violence at the end. That's really about it. This is called Bird Set Free. There was a boy with wings who couldn't fly. No, that's not right. I was a boy with wings who couldn't fly. I couldn't breathe either, but that was because of the childhood asthma I outgrew, and not the giant wings I never grew into. Sorry for trying to lie before and pretend this story wasn't about me. Sometimes it's easier to tell the truth when the truth you're telling is about someone else. That's why people frequently tell stories about their friends when the story they're telling is particularly embarrassing. No one likes looking foolish, even to strangers who probably don't give a shit and won't remember them 10 minutes after they part company. It's not even that we're ashamed of the things we've done. It's about our reflections. When I look in the mirror, I see Isaac Ramsey, a 16-year-old kid with pale skin, blue-gray eyes, shaggy hair, and an easy smile who's mildly attractive under the right circumstances, wings notwithstanding. The reflection I see is the image I've built of myself over the course of my life. It's comfortable, and I'm used to it. But I know that when I'm done telling you my story, I'll look into your eyes and see a totally different person reflected back at me. Someone who's not as good or kind as he thinks he is. Someone grotesque and a little bit twisted. I'll see me the way you see me. I won't be able to go back to seeing myself the old way ever again. That's why I started this story with a lie. Not because I'm trying to deceive you, but because I'm not sure I'm ready to stop deceiving myself. You get it, right? You understand, right? So I was a boy with wings who couldn't fly. I wasn't born with wings. I was born normal. A little jaundiced, but a few days in an incubator under UV lights fixed that problem pretty quickly. I was nearly born in the front seat of my mom's Ford Fairmont while our neighbor Jean fought Providence traffic to get to the hospital. But my mother squeezed her legs together and cussed and swore she wasn't going to let me breathe my first breath in a shitty car traveling on I-95. I wish I could say that Mom named me Isaac after Isaac Newton or even Isaac Asimov, but she just found the name in a book and thought it was pretty, so it stuck. I'm not sure if it's better or worse than my sister Lucy, who my mom named after a character on her favorite show at the time, but at least her name is a name with a story. So, no, I wasn't born with wings. Those didn't start coming in until I hit puberty. You think acne and hormones and periods and random boners are bad? Try waking up one morning with knobby protrusions growing out of your back. Dr. Rhodes, who'd been my pediatrician since I was born, didn't know what the hell they were at first. He sent me for x-rays and all kinds of tests, but in the end, the only thing we could do was wait and see what they turned into. Wings. They turned into wings. Giant fucking wings. And as if having wings wasn't bad enough, I had ugly wings. The fleshy bones grew out of my shoulder blades and extended outward and were connected by a thin peach gossamer membrane that refracted the sunlight. and the membrane itself was covered with fine hairs that were nearly too thin to see, sort of like the velvety feel of a deer's newly ramped up antlers. If I'd had a choice, I wouldn't have had wings at all, but since I didn't have a choice, I wished I could have at least had beautiful wings. Wings like a butterfly or an eagle or something. Instead, mine looked like I'd swiped them from an overgrown albino bat. Dr. Rhodes and my mother consulted with a surgeon about having them removed, but when I went under the knife, I nearly bled to death. Something about the way the blood vessels fed into the wings made it impossible to chop them off without killing me, which meant I was stuck with them. And they weren't even good for anything. My wings lacked the muscles that connected to my chest that would have allowed me to actually fly. I think I could have accepted having wings if I could have flapped them a couple of times and lifted into the air and seen the world the way the birds see it, but the genetic anomaly that had given me wings had denied me the opportunity to use them. Let's get it all out of the way now. Bird boy, kiwi, flappy kid, whatever name you're thinking about calling me that you've decided is super clever and original, trust me, I've heard it before. Anyone who's ever been bullied has been told by some well-meaning adult that kids can be cruel. But all the name-calling and bullying, it's not about cruelty. Most of the time anyway. There are definitely some real psycho assholes who get off on making other people's lives hell. Mostly, though, it's about survival. You're either a bullied, or a bystander pretending not to notice what's going on. And if you fall into that last category, not only are you a spineless asshole, but you run the risk of eventually becoming a target. I'm not defending bullies, don't get me wrong, but I get it. I get them. I probably would have been one if my wings hadn't made me such an easy victim. I was 13, tall, lanky, peach fuzz on my lip, wispy hair under my arms, and giant fucking wings growing out of my back. Mom wanted to homeschool me, but she dropped out of high school when she was 17 because she loved John Lennon and getting high. She claimed Lennon's death was the reason she stopped going to school, but honestly, I think it was the part where she loved weed more than Beowulf. Either way, she wasn't the best person in the world to continue my education. I actually consider myself pretty lucky that I made it to 16 without any deep emotional scars. I took my share of verbal beatings, but nothing that left me feeling like more of an outcast than your typical 16-year-old outsider feels like. Between my mom and her friends, they managed to shield me from the attention of the outside world. I slipped by unnoticed, and I managed to carve out a somewhat normal life for myself in shitty little East Providence. And then someone came looking for me, and that's where it all went to shit. Dude, you some kind of fairy? When you grow up in a Rhode Island town like East Prov, you get used to people saying stupid shit, like bubbler instead of water fountain, or grinder instead of sub. You also get used to them pronouncing things all messed up. My uncle says stir like steer, and when I once tried to correct him, he told me I was wrong because you steer the spoon around the cup. The difference between most people and Rudy Mancuso was that at least the stupid stuff they said was usually original. Only I didn't get to say that because Rudy followed his insult with a fist, and I found myself sprawled flat on my ass in the muddy snow behind the gym. I spat blood and tongued my teeth to make sure none were loose. I don't know. I don't think this counts as foreplay, Rudy. It would have been funnier if there had been someone else around to hear it. Instead, I'd wasted my best material on a 17-year-old 10th grader with the reading comprehension of a 3rd grader. I struggled to get to my feet, having to scoop my legs behind me to get my balance because, in addition to not growing the musculature to actually use my wings, they totally screwed up my center of gravity. I didn't ask you back here to fuck around, Ramsey, Rudy said. Well, now I'm confused. The only reason to ask someone to go behind the gym with them was to fight or fuck, and I couldn't recall having done anything to Rudy Mancuso to make him want to fight me. Of course, in 1988 there wasn't much worse insult than being called queer, but I had wings growing out of my back. Everything else different about me seemed totally normal in comparison. Rudy rolled his eyes and stuck out a hand to help me up. I accepted because the ground was cold and my wings were muddy, and I was kind of still hoping we might get around to the part of being behind the gym that didn't involve fighting. I know what you're thinking. Isaac is such a cliche, being all horny for the school bully, but I assure you it had nothing to do with low self-esteem or self-hate or anything like that. It's totally possible to think someone is a complete dickhead and still want them to give you head. I came to tell you that some guy came to see my pops last night about you. I paused in the middle of trying to wipe the mud off of my jeans and looked up at Rudy. I was tall, but he was taller. And broader. I was a rectangle, and he was a square. Are you for real? Do you think I'd risk people seeing us together and getting the wrong idea otherwise? Rudy made a good point, but I was still stuck on someone asking his dad about me. Joe Mancuso was known for many things around town. Being a raging drunk, having the highest number of citations for public urination of anyone in East Providence, and being a completely amoral private detective who made a living hunting down deadbeat dads, stalking potentially cheating spouses, and generally exposing secrets most people would rather remain buried in the deepest, darkest hole imaginable. Only the morally bankrupt and truly desperate sought the services of Rudy's dad. And? I asked. What'd this guy want? Who was he? Rudy shrugged. Asked if Pops knew about some kid who supposedly had wings. Unless there's another freak running around, I figured he meant you. Did your dad tell him anything? He doesn't do nothing for free. For once, your father's avaricious nature is good for something. It won't take much, Isaac, Rudy said. This dude could squeeze Pops easy, and it wouldn't take much more than a couple of cheap beers. He let his eyes wander to my wings, which I kept pulled tightly against my back. It was uncomfortable, like having a constant, unreachable itch between my shoulder blades, but I did it to keep from drawing any unnecessary attention to myself. If I could have tied them down and hidden them under a trench coat or hoodie or something, I would have done that too, but they were too big for all that. What'd the guy look like? A serial killer? I sighed and frowned. Why, I asked, was he carrying a set of newly sharpened knives and plastic sheeting and wearing a shirt that said, I dismember people, and you can too? Rudy shook his head. Just looked like the kind of guy who could gut you and then grab a burger on the way home without thinking twice about it. When I didn't say anything, he said, a little shorter than you, bald on top, curly brown on the sides, mustache, black t-shirt. A mustache? I said. Why didn't you say so? He's definitely a serial killer. You need to get punched again? Rudy clenched his fist like he was seriously considering it, and I instinctively touched my swollen lip and flinched from the pain. Explaining it to Mom was probably going to hurt worse. I'd rather not, I said. Then, thanks. Rudy stood in front of me like he wasn't sure what to do next. I wasn't sure what to do either. I was supposed to be in fourth period, and it's not like I could walk in 20 minutes late with a fat lip and not expect to get a detention or worse. So, not that I'm not grateful, I said, but why did you tell me? You've got a little crush on me, don't you? It's the wings. Dudes dig the wings. Why you gotta be such an asshole? Call it a defense mechanism. You're a freak, you know that, right? Rudy hadn't said anything I hadn't heard before, but it still hurt when he said it, because rather than flinging it at me as an insult the way most people did, Rudy had said it with a matter-of-factness that cut me to the core. He wasn't insulting me, he was describing me. I know, I said. But the thing is, you're kind of our freak, he said. Are you sure you're not into me? Rudy stared down his flat nose. Isaac, run. I held up my hands. Please don't hit me in the face. Not from me, he said. From whoever's looking for you. Run. Keep running till you can't run anymore. Then crawl if you have to. I didn't care if he punched me again. I stood on my toes and kissed Rudy on the cheek before I took his advice and ran. Lucy was making out with Troy Jackson when I ran through the front door, sweat streaming down my temples despite the cold. His hands were up her shirt, and his shirt was completely gone. As soon as the kitchen door slammed into the counter, they rolled off the couch in a tangle of arms and legs, trying to pretend they weren't actually up to anything they shouldn't have been. Truth was, I liked Troy, but I didn't see my sister dating him because... But I didn't like my sister dating him because I was pretty sure she was just using him for the attention, which, dating a boy with a criminal record, definitely got her. You're not Mom. Lucy tugged her ripped black shirt down over her belly. She was going through a punk rock phase, which was better than her weird Grateful Dead phase, and had taken scissors and safety pins to everything she owned. Why aren't you at school? Why aren't you? She countered. I pointed at Troy, who was low to the ground and trying to sneak toward the door. I expect this shit from Lucy, but you're supposed to be smarter than this. Troy's head dipped. We don't do it a lot. I wanted to yell at him, to yell at them both, to tell them they were risking throwing their lives away and winding up doing nothing but popping out kids the way our own mom had, but I didn't have time. It might have just been paranoia from what Rudy had told me, but I swear a car had followed me the whole way home, going real slow and parking every once in a while to make it seem like it wasn't really trailing me. Whether I was being followed or not wasn't going to change what I needed to do. It just meant that I might not have as much time as I thought I did. Lucy was beautiful, even under the heavy black makeup and bleached out hair. But more than that, she was brilliant, like scary brilliant. She annoyed the shit out of me mostly, and I wasn't prone to complimenting her much, so believe me when I tell you that I don't think there was anything she wasn't capable of doing if she turned even a fraction of her brain power to it. Look, Luce, I said, do whatever you want, just be great at it. I pointed at Troy, and you, lift her out or get the hell out of her way. Lucy dropped her defensive posture and was looking at me through narrow eyes now. What's going on, Isaac? You're being suspiciously brotherly. I don't like it. There was never a chance I could keep the truth from my sister, which was why I'd hoped to do this while she was at school. But since she'd screwed up that plan, honesty was all I had left. I think someone's come for me. Troy might have been confused by the statement, but Lucy wasn't. It was an eventuality we'd planned for. Despite how insulated and safe we felt, the possibility that word of a boy with wings living in Rhode Island might escape and catch the attention of someone with hostile intention was the specter that haunted us. Hidden in the back of my closet was a duffel bag with clothes, $1,000 cash, and a fake driver's license. Mom didn't take much seriously, but she'd made sure to keep the ID updated with a recent picture, replaced the clothes when I outgrew the old ones, and she never even thought about touching that money, even when all we had to eat was ketchup sandwiches. I guess after 16 years, I'd gotten used to the idea that this town might have swallowed me up so completely that no one would ever find me. Most of the kids I knew thought being stuck in a shithole like this was the worst thing that could happen to them. Their nightmares were made of graduation and babies and shotgun weddings and winding up at the same jobs that were slowly devouring their parents' tattered souls. But not me. My greatest hope was to live here until I died. But if there was even the slimmest chance that someone had come for me, I needed to leave. Who? She asked. Maybe you're just overreacting. I shook my head. Some creep went to Rudy Mancuso's dad about a kid with wings. That was all Lucy needed to hear. She shoved her way past Troy, grabbed my hand, and dragged me into my bedroom. She dug the duffel bag out of the back of my closet and threw it at me. Go, she said. I'll tell Mom. I'll try to call you when I get to... Lucy cut me off. Don't say where. It was all happening so quickly. The thing I'd feared most was happening, and even though we'd planned for this, I still had trouble wrapping my brain around it. I was leaving my home, and I didn't know when or if I'd ever be able to return. I blinked and felt tears in the corners of my eyes. I rushed Lucy and hugged her close. What if it's nothing? I whispered into her shoulder. I could stay until we know more. Lucy shook her head. It's too risky, Isaac. There was a hitch in her voice. I couldn't bear the idea of you locked up in some cage somewhere. You have to go. Troy stood in the doorway watching us. He cleared his throat, causing Lucy and I to look toward him. Don't mean to interrupt, but I thought you should know there's a car parked on the other side of the street. Blue Caddy. Looks a little X-Files to me. Lucy shoved me away roughly. Go out back, she said. I'll cover you. Luce. Go, Isaac! Before I could stop her, Lucy pulled Troy toward the front door, and they spilled into the front yard, looking to anyone watching like a couple of truants who'd skipped school to spend the afternoon drinking and screwing. I shouldn't have let her get involved, but now that she was, I couldn't let it be for nothing. I headed downstairs to the basement, navigated through the stacked boxes of holiday decorations and old books we'd inherited when we started renting the house until I reached the stairs leading up to the backyard. I didn't want to leave. This was my home. It didn't even belong to us, but every consequential memory I carried with me was created in this house. I'd lost my first tooth in the bathroom upstairs. I'd broken my arm in the front yard when Lucy had convinced me to jump off of the roof trying to fly. My mom had taken care of me when I was sick, and we'd played cards all night long during snowstorms, huddled around the fireplace. And now, I was being forced to leave behind everyone I loved and everything that made me the person I was. But Lucy was right. I didn't have a choice. I climbed the stairs, opened the door, and left my house for the last time. Where do you go when you're a boy with wings who can't fly? Where can you run where no one will find you? The thing that made me need to run was also the thing that would never let me stop running. I couldn't hide who or what I was for long. Eventually, someone would see the wings and wonder what they were, and the questions would follow. I ran between the houses, zigzagging randomly and without a destination in mind. When I was out of breath, I took a knee and dug around in my duffel for a heavy winter jacket that I pulled on and used the hood to conceal my wings as best as I could. It wouldn't fool anyone who looked closely, but it would have to be enough. My plan was to get to the train station in Providence, catch the first train going anywhere, and figure it out from there. Mom had told me I would need to avoid large cities, but even she hadn't been able to tell me where I might find refuge. I thought maybe I'd hitchhike like Jack Kerouac and lose myself in the wilderness, but I didn't know the first thing about surviving off of the land. It was more likely that the land would kill me and make a feast of me before I'd made it a week. It's not like I had a whole lot of other choices, though. Lucy had thought that, despite what Mom said, I might actually be better off in a city like New York, where the weird and odd were so common I could become invisible. Either way, it was irrelevant until I got out of East Providence, and I needed a car to do that. Mom worked at Sal's off of Warren Ave. She'd been working there since I was born and would probably work there until the place closed or she got too old to keep serving their shitty coffee and runny eggs. It's not the kind of life she dreamed of for herself when she was my age, but she didn't complain. She never complained about anything, really. She took what came her way and made the best of it. It's one of the things I admire most about her. I worried that if someone was looking for me and had come to the house, they might think to watch Sal's too, so I hid in the alley by the CVS and watched my mom through the windows as she flirted with the old men at the tables she was serving. Everyone said she looked exactly like she had in high school, like she'd been frozen in time when she dropped out and hadn't aged a day since. She kept her curly auburn hair piled on top of her head to show off her long neck, and moved around the small diner with an easy grace. Mom's car was parked on the side of the street, a little ways down from Sal's, and I scanned the area for anyone suspicious who might have been watching, but the only suspicious person around seemed to be me. The car was a rusty red VW Bug she'd bought for $400 from a customer who promised her it would run, but couldn't promise for how long. That was 3 years ago, and though Big Red often grumbled about cranking up when it was cold, she hadn't let us down yet. The longer I stayed, the greater the chance that someone would think to look for me here. I was worried about Lucy and what had happened after I'd run. I hoped she was smart enough to not put herself in danger. I felt a little better knowing Troy was with her, but really the truth was Lucy could take care of herself. I wanted nothing more than to go into Sal's and hug my mom because I didn't know if I would ever see her again. I wanted to tell her that I loved her and that I could never repay her for everything she'd done for me. She protected me from the world. She shined her light in the dark to guide me home when I got lost, and she carried me when I couldn't make it on my own. I know there are people who might look at her life and consider it meaningless. I know there were people who might look at her life and consider it a meaningless small life since she'd never graduated high school or worked at anything other than waiting tables, but she'd done more than simply bring me into the world. She'd given the world to me. I couldn't go in, though. It would put her in danger, and she'd never forgive me for risking my life to say goodbye. I could only hope she knew how much I loved her, and she would tell me that the best way for me to show her would be to leave and never look back. With some trepidation, I pulled my hood as tight over the tops of my wings as I could and scurried across the street until I reached her car. I resisted the urge to look over my shoulder so that I didn't seem suspicious. Mom never locked the car, and she kept a spare set of keys in the glove box because no one looking for a car to steal would ever consider stealing hers. I dropped the keys trying to put them in the ignition and had to strip off my gloves to do it on the second try. Big Red shuddered and shook before the engine whirred to life. This was it. No turning back. If I ran now, I was going to have to keep running for the rest of my life. I didn't have to. I could stay, make my stand here in the place I was born and had spent all of my life. Even being a freak, I'd found a strange sort of acceptance here. That a bully like Rudy Mancuso had warned me proved that these people were my people. They'd protect me like they had since my wings first grew in. They'd keep my secret. But I'd be exposing them to constant danger. None of us would ever be safe so long as I stayed. My mother and Lucy would never be safe. Finally, I shifted the car into drive and pulled onto Warren Ave. And I didn't look back. I left Big Red in the Amtrak parking lot and bought a ticket to Minneapolis. I had no intention of going all the way there, but figured I could get off at one of the stops along the way in case whoever was searching for me questioned the bored woman who'd sold me the ticket. I didn't want to make it too easy. The train was quiet, and I tried to sleep in the uncomfortable seat by the window, but every time someone walked down the aisle or laughed loudly, I jerked fully awake. I'd bought the cheapest ticket. $1,000 was more money than I'd ever had at one time in my life, but even I wasn't stupid enough to think it would last forever. I made the transfer in Philadelphia, and we'd just passed Lancaster when I realized someone was watching me. He was the kind of man I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't been looking for him. Plainly dressed, balding, mustache. He was just like Rudy had described him, and he did look like a serial killer. It was the flatness in his eyes, like he could slit your throat or make a sandwich, and his expression wouldn't change in the slightest. What was I supposed to do, trapped on the train? Where could I go? How had he found me? These were useless questions. It didn't matter how he'd found me, only that he had found me, and what I did next. Surely the man wouldn't try anything while we were on the train surrounded by people, so I figured I was safe as long as I remained where I was. The next hour passed, and the knot of anxiety in my stomach grew like a tumor, devouring everything else in my gut until I felt pregnant with fear. Only, I wasn't carrying the hope of a future generation, but the fear of a slow, agonizing death at the hands of someone who saw me as a monster. I considered all of my options. Altoona was the next stop, and I could get off the train and try and lose him. I could stay on the train until the next transfer and try and lose him there. I could look for a train conductor and ask for help, but that person might involve police, and that was a last resort. Mom had told me I couldn't trust the police. They were merely cogs in a machine and easily influenced by men more powerful than them. Whoever this man was following me, he could have had contacts anywhere that would have allowed him to convince the police to let me take him, or to let him take me. I briefly considered trying to seek help from another passenger. 3 seats ahead of me, a woman sat with her 2 young daughters trying to keep them entertained. One of the things Mom had told me was that I could usually count on the protective instincts of mothers. She said it didn't matter whether the kid in danger was hers or not. A mother would almost always do whatever she could to help a child in need. It was tempting, but as I glanced at the man peel and eat an orange while he pretended not to watch me, I feared what he would do to anyone who helped me. I'd left home to protect my family, and it didn't seem fair to put another family at risk for a chance to save my own ass. After weighing my options, my only real choice seemed to be running when we reached Altoona. I waited until we neared the station before getting up and moving away from the mustache toward another car that would hopefully contain more passengers and make it easier to get lost. When I reached the door dividing the cars, I saw the man in the reflection had also risen and was slowly making his way toward me, confirming that he was definitely the man Rudy had warned me about. The next car was even emptier than the one I'd been in, so I kept moving until I reached a car that felt sufficiently full of people. The man followed me toward the car. I took a seat near the exit so that I could try to run off as soon as we reached the station at Altoona. At that moment, I didn't know whether I would stay in Altoona and try to make my way north and west somehow, or lose the man and try and get back on the train before it left the station again. All I knew was that this was my life now. I saw it as if the future was spread out in front of me like a movie. No matter what I did or where I went, someone was always going to pursue me. They were always going to find me. Anyone I met or tried to befriend would be in danger. Anyone who offered me shelter or protection was putting their life at risk. I would never be safe. I would never be free. After 16 years of anonymity, this was my life's new trajectory. I wondered how my life might have been different if my mom hadn't tried to hide what I was, if she'd shown me to the world when my wings erupted. It was easy to disappear a winged boy when so few people knew he existed, but if the world had known, it might not have been so easy. I knew my mom had done what she'd thought was right, and I didn't falter for it. It's easy to navigate the ocean of the past when you're standing on the shore of the present looking backward, but still, I couldn't help wondering. The train rolled to a stop, and a muffled voice over the speaker announced that we were stopping in Altoona and would resume traveling again in 10 minutes. So I had 10 minutes to lose the man, get back on the train, or I'd have to find another way to wherever I was going. The moment the doors opened, I rushed off the train and bolted left. I didn't know the station well, and it didn't matter. I ran, and I ran. I looked over my shoulder and saw the man pursuing. He wasn't running. He followed me like he had all the time in the world, like he knew with some kind of utter certainty that he would catch me eventually. Returning to the train wasn't an option, so I took a sharp turn out of the station into the parking lot. Across the lot stood a post office. I turned right back toward the tracks, hoping to cross them and lose the man on the other side. But I'd made a mistake. While I'd been on the train, the afternoon had died and given way to evening. The sun set early in January, and people deserted the world quickly. I ran into the twilight, barely stopping at the tracks to look for trains before crossing them. I headed toward a train depot where the carcasses of cars waited to be transported to their final resting places. My best hope at that point was to find some place to hide until morning. I wove between the cars and ducked into an empty one that still had crates in it, covered by a musty tarp. It wasn't a good hiding spot, but maybe I could wait there and make it back to the station before my train left. I kept low and tried to slow my breathing. The minutes passed. I didn't know how many, but I'd been crouching for so long that my thighs burned. My train had surely left by now. Maybe the man had passed by and it was safe for me to find a better spot to hide. Sadly, that's not what happened. "You can come out, Isaac." The voice came from outside the broken car, and it was deep and emotionless. He knew my name. He'd probably gotten it from Mr. Mancuso. I wondered how many beers it had cost him. "If you make me come in there after you, when I'm finished, I'll return to your home and cut your sister Lucy's throat. Then I'll go upstairs and shoot your mother. After that, your grandparents, and every person you have ever known." He stated it robotically, as if he didn't care one way or another whether he killed them or not. I had no choice. I stood, but before I walked out of the car, I shucked my jacket and dropped it onto the filthy floor. I left my duffel bag as well. I stood on the edge of the car and the door and scanned for the man before hopping onto the ground. And I spread my wings to their full width. It felt like the first deep breath after being underwater for too long. My wings shone in the sodium lights overhead. They extended over 6 feet from end to end, and I held them high and imposing, throwing my demonic shadow over the dirt and snow-packed ground. "Impressive," the man said. "You won't touch my family," I said. "Not now, not ever." "Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But if I don't, it won't be because you told me not to." I hid my scream. I buried it deep so this man would never hear it. He could clip my wings, but he could never take my voice. "Where are you going to take me?" The man laughed. It was the first emotion I'd seen on his face since I'd spotted him on the train, but even that looked less like real emotion and more like a shitty simulacrum. "I'm not taking you anywhere." "Then what?" The question died on my lips. You're going to kill me." "That's what I was paid to do." "Why?" He shrugged. "Don't know." "You didn't ask?" "I never do." The man wasn't even holding a gun or any kind of weapon. I cursed my wings that couldn't fly. If I could have, I would have flown away and the man wouldn't have been able to follow. The best I could do now was stall and hope someone stumbled by and interrupted him before he could kill me. "Who then?" I asked. "If you're going to kill me, you could at least tell me who wants me dead." "Don't know that either," he said. "But I can tell you that you're not the first wing kid I've killed. You're not even the first this month." "There are others?" I'd wondered before if I was the only one, but Dr. Rhodes had assured me she'd never heard of another case like mine. But maybe they'd been hiding the way I had. "How many?" The man blinked, slowly, bored. "Enough talking." He reached inside his leather jacket and pulled out a shiny black gun. I didn't know what kind. It didn't matter. Please don't kill me, I said. I don't want to die. No one does, kid. He raised the gun, aimed it at my leg, and fired. I lost consciousness. Sorry about this. The screams I'd been holding in tore out of my throat. The booted foot on my lower back. The knife that sawed through the bones connecting my wings to my shoulders. I screamed, and I screamed, and I screamed, until eventually he shoved a rag in my mouth while he finished. When I woke up, I was alone. I was covered in blood. I crawled through the snow, leaving a trail of blood behind me. Every inch of ground I covered was agony, but I struggled and clawed and held on tight to the life left in me. The little girl stares at me with bright brown eyes like beacons against her dirt-smudged face. She's 5, maybe 6. She hasn't said a single word since she found me leaning against the wheel of an abandoned train car. Not that it matters. Everything I need to know about myself is reflected in her eyes. I'm a freak. I'm a coward for running. I'm a failure for letting the man escape when he could still go after my family. There's a bag in one of the empty cars over there. I motion weakly toward where I'd been shot. Just follow the blood. It won't be long now. I feel my heart slowing. I feel the heat leaving my limbs. It won't be long. There's money in it. Find my mom, Ray Ramsey, and my sister, Lucy. Tell them what happened. Tell them I love them. It's hard to keep my eyes open. I thought I could hold on through the night. I'd held on long enough to tell this homeless girl my story, but I don't think I'll ever see the sunrise again. Tomorrow doesn't exist for me. Please, I beg her, please tell them for me. The little girl scoots closer to me and squeezes her tiny hand into mine. It's so warm against my skin. You can fly now, she says. As my last breath leaves my body, I know she's right. There was once a boy with wings who couldn't fly, but I am a boy without wings who finally can. And that's it. So there is the unpublished story that I promised. I hope you enjoyed it. There's probably a reason that I never try to publish it, but yeah, I will maybe do something with the concept at some point, hopefully. Anyway, I hope y'all are enjoying whatever these videos are. Lots of people are doing their readouts, and I hope everyone is staying inside and not touching your face and washing your hands and doing lots of baking and being safe and healthy. See you later.